Hello everyone, and thank you for tuning into this exclusive episode on the topic of depression, brought to you by the Anise group with our guest speaker, Miss Vivian Cheng. We really do appreciate the feedback that you have given to us on our webinars so far, and if you have any suggestions for topics for future webinars, do let us know. I'm Chris Tang, a co-owner and director of the Anise group, a group of companies that offer professional recruitment services, training programs, as well as secondment services for legal, compliance and business support professionals in Hong Kong and the rest of Asia. Unlike other presentations on this topic, we have the honour of hearing directly the impact of depression from an experienced professional in Hong Kong. Before I introduce you to Vivian, just a brief note from our legal team that the purposes of this webinar is for general information purposes only. Neither Vivian nor I are trained medical professionals, so none of the content discussed in our webinar should be considered medical or other advice. But we do hope that the discussion today will act as a springboard for further research into this topic by you, the audience, whether you feel you are showing some signs of depression or you would like to gain more knowledge on how to help a colleague, friend or loved one who may be suffering from a depressive episode. And we also want to assure you that it is perfectly okay to talk openly about depression. It's a topic where experiences need to be shared as part of the healing process, and so that it encourages others to be aware that it can affect anyone. Now, the topic of depression is a highly sensitive one, and from my understanding, the very act of listening or talking about this topic may trigger a negative reaction in your mental or physical well-being. If at any part of this show you feel the onset of a trigger warning, please do switch off. Given this show is recorded, you can revisit at a later time. We have also included an index of topics with timestamps in the introduction below, so feel free to go back and forth on discussions for your convenience. I hope you will find this discussion as informative and eye-opening as I did. Enjoy the show. So I'd like to begin with a brief introduction about our guest speaker, Vivian Cheng. And Hong Kong born and raised, Vivian emigrated at a young age with her family to Canada to continue her education. A graduate of the University of British Columbia in Vancouver, it was in this city where she commenced her graduate career with National Bank, Canadian Imperial Bank of Canada, or CIBC for short. Vivian proved to be both adept and adaptable to banking life, fulfilling multiple roles from private banking, real estate credit to running teams in business banking, and experiencing multiple promotions in her 11-year stellar career at the bank. From here, she moved back to the city of her birth, Hong Kong, where she spent 13 years with HSBC in learning and talent management. After a 9-month career break to nurture her well-being, Vivian joined Community Business, a not-for-profit organization, where she pursued her passion as a diversity and inclusion consultant and helps promote D&I and educate employers in Hong Kong on this topic. Now, you're probably thinking, why is a legal recruitment firm hosting a webinar on this topic? As a former practicing lawyer, I've been in highly stressful situations, facing client pressures, time and billing pressures, and internal pressures. And now, dealing with lawyers on both the client and candidate side as a professional recruiter, I see the enormous pressures that they face. Little surprise then that the statistics on depression go heavily against the legal profession. Over 800,000 reported suicides worldwide are caused by depression. And in academic studies, lawyers are over 3.5 times more likely to suffer from depression. So in the next slide, we see some of the common factors that contribute towards a higher rate of depression suffered by lawyers. And I can relate to many of these factors. So I think we can just run off these one by one straight off. As lawyers, you have to show you're strong, you're resilient, almost invincible. Showing any signs of weakness can be perceived as negative to your work performance. So there's also a fear that causes you to simply shut up and put up for the sake of your career. And that's really not healthy or helpful to anyone. So if we can just run through those slides all in one go. And now that brings me to our guest speaker, Vivian. Now, I first came across Vivian last year with her very insightful and emphatic posts on LinkedIn. So let's go on to the next slide, please. And her story is one that I am sure many people can relate or understand. So it gives me great pleasure to welcome Vivian to our show. Vivian, thank you so much for joining us. It's so rare for anyone in any profession to talk about depression, and it's such an incredible and brave thing to do. If anyone goes to your LinkedIn profile, they will see a heavy emphasis on your raising awareness on the topic of depression with your first person's perspective on LinkedIn and your weekly blog posts called #Thisisme. You've been very vocal on social media and as well as in person as you give presentations to large companies on the topic of depression. So Vivian, why does this topic hold so dear to your heart?
Okay, thank you, Chris. And first of all, I'd like to thank Chris and Anise for having me here today. I also like to thank the audience for being on this show. I hope my sharing would help our audience understand more what living with depression looks and feels like, so we could normalize the conversation and be less afraid to talk about it. Now, why is this topic so close and dear to my heart? I have been living with depression for over 20 years, and there was a period of time where I was so sick, I was bedridden, I was not able to go to work. I felt very lonely and scared because I didn't know what was happening to me, and did not have the vocabulary to describe the pain I was in. Eventually, I was clinically diagnosed of major depressive disorder, and this is a recurrent long-term form of depression. It would come and go for the rest of my life. And I was told by my psychiatrist that there could be a chance that I would never go back to work. I was totally devastated because my career was taking off at that time. I'm not a quitter, but to be honest, there were times when the pain became so unbearable, it was tough not to think about giving up. Long story short, after years of hard work, patience, professional help, support from friends and family, lots of tears, I am where I am today. And I'm very proud of myself. I did eventually go back to work, and I'm still working now. On the other hand, it is not only the depressives who are suffering. Their loved ones are also suffering because most of them feel helpless. They don't know how to offer help. So sometimes with good intentions, they're causing more pain to the sufferers. So when someone is physically ill, it's easy to get them presents, flowers, cards, and lots of tender loving care. But when someone discloses that they have a mental illness, are we able to share the same kind of care and concern, or are we lost for words? And why is that? I'm in a much better place now, and I want to use my unfortunate experience to help others. It is such a stigmatized illness. Most people are afraid to talk about it. I have no qualms talking about it, and I'm determined, committed to use my voice to create awareness and education and open up and normalize conversation so people do not have to suffer in silence. And I want to do it in a way that is relatable, open, and authentic, so people actually understand what is going on.
I think it's very clear from this picture, how the stark difference between responding to somebody who is physically ill compared with somebody who is mentally ill.
Yeah, so Chris, let me give you an example of how different illnesses are perceived and some of the ways we could offer support. I'm a great fan of American's Got Talent. Do you watch that show?
Yeah, I mean, I quite often see it up on social media, on Facebook and Instagram. There's clips of those showing up everywhere.
Yeah, it's a very popular TV talent show. And I'm going to share with you bits from an audition, which I found very inspiring. So Jane is a contestant and her audition has received over 30 million views in 2 months, in just 2 months. And it was so popular, not only because she was a great singer, but more so on how inspiring she is fighting a critical illness. When we look at the clips, which last about 1 minute, let's look at the judge's responses when she disclosed her medical condition. And before we do that, I'd like to share an update. She has withdrawn from the competition because her medical condition has turned worse. And I like to highlight here that I am not comparing my experience to hers, nor minimizing her pain in any way, shape, or form. I'm just very inspired and touched by her positivity when she's fighting such a difficult battle and the lessons we could learn from her. This is why I'm sharing these bits from the auditions with you. So, Kieran.
There's no sound. Go to the bottom left and then click on the loudspeaker. So we're encountering a slight technical glitch here.
Okay, well, maybe I could recap the highlights from that clip. So after Jane disclosed that she has been dealing with cancer, Simon asked, "Can I ask you a question? How are you now?" So a useful thing to do with somebody who is dealing with depression is like checking in with me instead of avoiding the topic or start giving me advice. I thought that was very useful.
Yes.
And also Jane said, "Last time I checked, I had some cancer in my lungs, my spine, and liver." And Howie said, "Wow, so you're not okay." So acknowledging that I am not well and it is okay. And thirdly,
we have the video back on again. Maybe we'll try again.
Okay.
Maybe let's try again.
Do we have sound?
I don't know. We can try and turn up the sound on computer and unmute. See if that works. So maybe if we just continue, you can just run through what they're saying.
Yeah, the third thing was how we went on to say, "You've got a beautiful smile, a beautiful glow." And let me tell you why this is so encouraging and comforting for depressive to hear. During my first episode, when I was a relationship manager in Canada, I had a coworker. He worked in a different office. He called me every single week religiously, checking in with me. And every single time I picked up the phone, the first thing he said was, "Hi, gorgeous and talented." It was very simple, but the strength that I got from that phrase was so powerful. And to date, we're talking about almost 20 years later, I could still hear "Hi, gorgeous and talented" ringing in my ears. I'm still beautiful and smart, even though I was sick. And the weekly calls, that consistency, that genuine praises and validation made me feel so supported and loved. And that emotional support was important in my recovery. And it was really important to know that somebody cares and actually somebody cared enough to pick up the phone to call you every week. So Howie saying to her, you've got a beautiful smile, a beautiful glow, is also something appropriate to say to somebody who's going through depressive, not only appropriate, but powerful and helpful. And the other thing Jane said in this clips was she was there by herself. And I found that incredibly brave of her. If I could share a story. Now, being on AGT is challenging. Yeah, and I found taking up challenges and overcoming them really helpful. It has been proven that being in touch with nature is helpful for depression, and I love the ocean. So I tried different water sports, and one of them was kayaking. So in Vancouver, my hometown, even in the summer, the water is freezing. One time I went kayaking and it capsized. I fell into the freezing water and got hypothermia. So I thought, okay, I will take a course to learn how to recover from a capsized kayak. And on the day of the lesson, I was getting ready, and all of a sudden this loneliness hit, and I was very scared. To recover from a capsized kayak, you first have to flip the kayak and fall into the freezing ocean. And I was going to take this lesson alone with a bunch of strangers. I remember I laid out all the gears on the floor with tears in my eyes. I stared at them and I snapped the photo. I looked at the photo and I practiced positive self-talk. I said to myself, you will be fine, just go, you can do it. So I wiped away my tears, packed up, jumped into my SUV and off to the beach. So following the instructor's demonstration, I flipped my kayak, fell into the ocean, climbed back into my kayak. Everyone cheered, and I felt so proud of myself. I intentionally looked for something challenging to overcome, and I did it. Not only did it create a sense of accomplishment, it helped rebuild my self-confidence, create resilience. It also trained me to believe that I could overcome obstacles, and that include battling depression. Yeah.
What was that feeling when you suddenly realized that it's all unraveled everything, or a lot of things for you?
What was that? I'm sorry.
What was the feeling, when you realized that this was so helpful to you in terms of managing your depression?
The feeling was that you have this sense of you don't feel as worthless and useless, because I was bedridden for a long time and I wasn't really using my mind. I was quite worried, and that I was able to overcome obstacles or challenges was helpful, because when I was experiencing like depressive episodes, I knew I would be able to overcome it because I've done it so many times.
Yes.
In different things. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. It seems like we may have the sound back on again. Should we give it one final try? Just for the benefit of the audience. Okay, Kieran, if you go ahead. Thank you.
And the dream is to be a singer. What are you going to be singing for us tonight? I'm
singing an original song called It's Okay.
It's okay.
Yeah.
It is. It's okay.
It's okay.
What is It's Okay about?
It's Okay is the story of the last year of my life.
All right. And who are you here with?
I'm here by myself.
It's okay. And what do you do for a living?
I have not been working for quite a few years. I've been dealing with cancer.
Oh, sorry.
No, it's okay.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm okay.
All right.
Can I ask you a question? How are you now?
Last time I checked, I had some cancer in my lungs, my spine, and my liver.
Wow.
So you're not okay?
Well, not in every way, no.
You got a beautiful smile and a beautiful glow, and nobody would know.
Thank you. It's important that everyone knows I'm so much more than the bad things that happen to me.
Yes.
Yeah. So Chris, you think if she said that she had depression, would she have received the same responses or silence?
I suspect silence. I think in most cases, people are probably, well, they'll feel awkward about responding in any manner. So I think for me as well, if it were me reacting to someone who said something similar, I wouldn't know how to react.
Yeah. So that's why I highlighted what the judges said, because I thought those were excellent responses. Yeah. The last quote that she said in this clip was, "It is important that everyone knows that I am so much more than the bad things that has happened to me." This quote is all over social media, and I also think that it is important to highlight. Something unfortunate happened to me, and I think because of that, I have become a better version of me. I understand this illness, the pain, and I have had experience on what works and what doesn't. I want to use this experience to make a positive impact to a wider society. So I participate in speaking engagement. I have been sharing my lived experience of my depression on LinkedIn under hashtag #Thisisme. Thisisme is a storytelling campaign originated from Barclays in the UK, and I'm doing it to create awareness and education, hoping to spark conversation and break the stigma. And this was a personal initiative of mine. Now, I just learned that Bloomberg is partnering with Community Business, which is the nonprofit I'm working for right now, to promote this program in Asia. So you could see how seriously mental illness has started in the corporate world as well.
Yes.
The other thing I'm, sorry.
No, please continue.
The other thing I'm doing is I'm facilitating a support group for people struggling with mental issues with a partner. We create this safe space for people to share their struggles and support each other. And the reason I'm doing this because from experience, joining a support group was instrumental in my recovery process, and I want to give back. And if anyone is interested, please DM me.
That's great. No, thank you for that. Now, Vivian, just going on to our next slide. I first came across your posts and profile on LinkedIn, and I found they were heartfelt, informative, and we really get to know more about you as a person. It's clear from those posts that you are a strong and smart lady. So for the benefit of the audience, let's hear more about you, Vivian.
Okay, I think you introduced most of me already. Well, I was born in Hong Kong. I spent my half of my life here and half of my life in Canada. I grew up in a middle-class family with my parents and my brother. Like most of our audience here today, I've worked in a high-pressure, fast-paced environment in banking for most of my life. When I was living in Canada, I was working in a local bank as a relationship manager looking after business banking clients. After I returned to Hong Kong, I was a learning consultant with HSBC Commercial Banking, overseeing learning needs for 10 markets in Asia Pacific. And I am a passionate advocate for mental illness and diversity and inclusion. Recently, I started working for Community Business, a nonprofit advocating for diversity and inclusion. That's me. This is me.
So we go on to the next slide with where you share a couple of episodes of your depression.
Yeah, a lot of people think that depression is about sadness, but it is a lot more than that. Depression is both psychological and biological. And I'm going to use my experience to share what this is about. So I had two major episodes of depression. The first episode was about 18 years ago, and it started with psychological. I was living in Canada. I was going through a breakup of a long-term relationship. I didn't know I was clinically depressed, even though I was extremely sad. And I had this strong sense of hopelessness in me. I questioned the meaning of life. I was seeing a psychologist at that time because I didn't know what the purpose of life was. I just wanted to disappear from this world. However, I was still functioning well. I'm not sure how I did it, but I was still doing really well at work, exceeding targets, receiving awards. This episode, I would consider it mild, and I became better after a few years. Okay, and then about 10 years ago, my second episode happened, and it started with biological. So I started developing stomach pain, and I saw many doctors, but none of them was able to make a diagnosis. So 5 months later, 5 months of stomach pain later, I was clinically diagnosed of major depressive disorder. It could be classified as mild, moderate, or severe. And in my case, it was severe. I think it was beyond imagination to associate stomach pain with depression. Later on, I learned that stomach pain or my body was sending me a message that depression was coming. Yeah. So a very important point I wanted to bring out is depression is both psychological and biological. It is not as simple as being sad or stressed. I was not during my second episode, I was not sad and I was not too stressed out in life. I was actually quite content, if not happy. I had just settled into my new flat. I loved what I was doing at work. It was December and I was going home to Vancouver to spend the holidays with my family and friends. I was excited. And so everything seemed like all aspects of my life were going well. So the stomach pain became so unbearable after 5 months. It was interfering with my daily functioning. I was not able to eat. I was not able to sleep. I couldn't concentrate, and leading a normal life became a challenge. I was very confused and scared. I was often crying, extremely sad, and I became hopeless and suicidal. I didn't know what was happening to me. This was when I realized my emotional mental state has become problematic for me. A lot of times we think that depression is an emotional issue. It is more complex than that. And this time my depression started with biological symptoms, not psychological. So this is important to know, because if anyone is suffering from unexplained aches and pains physically, I would encourage you to have your mental health checked out by a professional as well, so you could start treatment earlier before it became out of control, like my experience. Yeah. So a study also revealed that 80% of depressives would experience the second episode after the first one. And I fell in that population. So you don't really have to have a trigger to have a depression. Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't.
So we then move on to the next slide as part of your personal experience. There seems to be a perception that if someone discovers someone else at work is suffering from depression, it automatically means that the ability of that person to do their work is affected negatively, and therefore their career will also be hindered. What do you say to that, Vivian?
Well, yes and no. Given the right level of support, right support system to get through the tough times, one can still excel in their career. For example, in my first career in Canada, when I was a relationship manager, meeting aggressive sales targets was core of my job responsibilities. We were supervised daily, and if you were not at 40% of your sales of your weekly target by Wednesday morning, you would get a call from your boss. And stressful was an understatement. Somehow, not only was I meeting my sales target every week, in most weeks I was exceeding my target. I was a top performer. I was high functioning. But between client meetings, I would be weeping in my office behind closed doors. And then during my second episode, I was a learning consultant for HSBC in the regional office as a representative of Asia Pacific region. I was leading a global project, consolidating learning programs from 80 countries into one world-class curriculum within a very tight timeline. Somehow I was able to work with different levels of stakeholders in different parts of the world to have the curriculum successfully deployed in my 10 countries. After late night global conference calls, I would be exhausted, but wide awake with intrusive thoughts. So I was in excruciating pain, but somehow I was able to function mostly normally, going to work and performing well. After I returned from sick leave, I felt like I was treated as a token employee, given token projects. I had to keep reminding management to focus on my ability, not my disability.
So could you share with us what support you found helpful from your work environment? What would be the right level of support be, i.e. the right support system for someone encountering a depressive episode?
Like I mentioned earlier, the coworker who worked in another office who called me every week. Yeah, and I was in Canada. In Hong Kong, when I was experiencing the stomach pain for that 5 months, I think by the 4th and 5th month, I was telling my line manager to find someone to replace me because I don't think I could make it much longer. So when I could still do a proper handover, I asked him to find a replacement. And my line manager, Arthur, said, no, it's Easter. You'll be going home again to spend time with your family. Perhaps you would feel better when you come back after a break. Let's hold off until you're back and see what happens. I'm moving to Shanghai. I want you to take my job. So after the Easter holidays, it was evident that I wasn't getting any better anytime soon. So I had to share the news with the department head, Frank, and he said to me, take 3 months off. When you come back, I have an exciting opportunity waiting for you. So when you suffer from depression, you are very, very unsure of your abilities, and there is this extreme lack of self-confidence. Arthur and Frank, they didn't see my depression as a burden. They saw my illness as only a temporary impediment to my work performance. They didn't understand it too much, and they didn't have to, but they offered accommodation generously, and they gave me hope for the future. They made me feel valued and worthy, and I'm forever grateful for their kindness. Arthur checked in with me religiously every week in the beginning, and then when I was much better, every month.
And that's all huge credit to your managers and your colleagues and the organization you were working at the time.
Mm-hmm.
But it may not necessarily be the case with all other organizations. And so, one of the goals of having this webinar with you is hopefully that the word will spread out and, there can be more understanding amongst organizations across Hong Kong and Asia.
Yeah. I mean, there are different kinds of people in an organization. It's very hard to say this organization is very supportive or that organization is very supportive. If it's the people in that organization, you could have some people in the organization being very supportive and some people aren't. But I like to focus on the ones who are supportive and share what they have done to make an employee feel supported. And hopefully, if you are a manager, you would be nice if you could do the same thing. Yeah.
And were you able to identify the root causes of your depression?
I think my parents played a crucial part in my depression. Going back to my childhood, I didn't feel safe at home because my parents were constantly fighting. I was always scared that I might lose them, and I felt responsible for their fighting. Now, there's no abuse at home here, but they were just not nice to each other. I was somehow expected to be the carer of everything at an early age. And my father had extremely high expectations of me. As a teenager, I was expected to know everything from building IKEA furniture to understanding legal documents to fixing my parents' marriage. And I learned later in life that when parents fight, kids feel responsible and they want to fix it. And you can't, nobody can fix anyone's relationship. So when you are failing at fixing something that is impossible to fix on a daily basis, what does that do to a child's self-esteem, self-confidence, sense of security, and how does that affect the child psychologically? But don't get me wrong, I love my parents to bits. I think they have tried their very best they could to raise me. And that conflict, at the same time, that conflict of love and anger added to the agony. So all of these created a lot of undealt with emotions, especially anger. And I was very angry with my father for not being nice to my mom. And I was also very angry that they were always fighting. I was too young to realize that I had this anger in me. And somehow subconsciously, I was holding it all in together until one day, all hell broke loose and my depression manifested in physical symptoms. I don't know if you've heard this phrase, depression is anger turned inwards. Yeah, a lot of times we think depression is caused by a divorce, a job loss, death in the family, but the root cause is often not apparent. It took a lot of work and courage and curiosity to explore, to uncover my root cause. It took like over 10 years of therapy, research, reading, reflection, all of that. Yeah.
That's a lot of stuff to take in, even at a very early age. And you've been very brave and being able to get through all of that, must have been very tough for you at the time.
It was, and I'm not gonna lie.
So Vivian, do you feel you've now recovered from your depression?
Unfortunately, people who are clinically diagnosed with depression do not fully recover. You learn to live with it, and that is the most challenging part, learn to live with it. Depending how severe your condition is, you pray to God. Remember I said it comes and go, it comes and go. You pray to God that when it comes back, it is not severe and you have the coping tools, the coping mechanisms to manage it. So it's less painful, it's less disruptive to your life. Well, I don't think we have enough time to go in more detail on what self-interventions I took to help myself recover, but it's in one of my blog posts, and I know you're going to share that under the resources with the audience after the webinar. But if I'm happy to get on another webinar to talk about recovery regimes later and at another time.
Okay, well, that's a great idea. Yeah, excellent. Well, that brings us to the end of our main discussion with Vivian, and moving to the Q&A section. We have some time to go through a couple of questions that have been raised. So if I can just go through the chat
Chris,
section.
I think we have not finished with the last slide.
Oh, sorry, last slide. Sorry,
Yeah.
there's something else you wanted to
Right.
raise on this.
Yeah.
Okay, sorry,
we go back?
apologies.
Yeah.
Go back to, yeah, okay.
Okay, so why are we sharing this photo? I think a photo says 1,000 words. This before and after photo, it's a success story worth celebrating. It's a story of growth, hope, and life. Now, if you look at this left one where I'm in this orange top, that was back in 2012 when I was in my worst condition. Lost a lot of weight. I was at 94 pounds. I looked anorexic. I had sad eyes, but it was one of the happiest day of my life because I was picking up Happy Sammy. Yeah. So, and then the other picture on the right, this was last year when I recovered. I back to my normal weight of 105 pounds. My eyes, I think there's stark difference between these two pictures on my eyes. I think the second picture on the right, glow with happiness. I looked healthy, and Sammy has turned 8. Yeah. So when I look at this photo, it reminds me of the journey that I had to go through before I get to where I am today. It reminds me of my resilience. I got through this before. I can do this again. And if any one of you is going through a journey, just be patient with yourself, have compassion for yourself, and you can do it. And this is a testimony.
Yes.
Yeah.
And wise words they are too, Vivian. Thank you so much. Okay. So if we go on to the Q&A. So a couple of questions. What are your thoughts about taking antidepressants?
Well, in the beginning, I was quite opposed to it, but my psychiatrist convinced me that it was a wise thing to do because I was not able to function. And when you cannot function, how do you help yourself get better? And in time, I was thinking, okay, my father has a heart disease. So he takes blood thinners and he has to get tested every 3 months. And he has to be on some sort of medication for the rest of his life. My mom has diabetes, so she's on diabetes medication for the rest of her life. Sammy, my dog, has a skin problem. And I have just come to terms that she has to be on medication for the rest of her life. So there's something wrong with my brain. There's nothing wrong with taking medications for that for the rest of my life.
Yes.
Yeah. Why would it be different, right? It's just another illness. Yeah.
Okay. And another question that's raised is, do psychologists work or psychiatrists even? What is the difference between the two?
Okay. A psychiatrist is a medical doctor who can prescribe medication. Okay. So they're called Dr. something, or in my case, Dr. Remick. Psychologists, they offer psychotherapy or talk therapy. They're not a medical doctor. They didn't go to medical school. Yeah, but sometimes you may see doctor in front of their names, and that's because they have a PhD. Not all psychologists have a PhD. Yeah, so the difference is psychiatrist, medical doctor, prescription, antidepressants, psychologist, no medication, talk therapy.
Right.
Yeah, they're both helpful, but looking for one that is suitable for you takes time. Because I have seen people go to come back and say, oh, it's not working. It's not working perhaps because he's not the one for you. It takes some time I think it's a matchmaking exercise.
Yeah. And have you had to go through that process yourself, going through a couple of professional advisors to help you?
I'm a bit lucky for psychologists. The first one I met, we got on really well. He got me. So I saw him for like over 10 years. My psychiatrist, Dr. Remick in Canada, he used to be my client when I was working at CIBC. So I looked him up, and he is one of the top psychiatrists in Canada. So I knew I was in good hands, and because I knew him from before, I have a lot of trust in him. And he saw me when I was not sick. So he saw me at my worst state. He saw me at my best state. So it was very comforting to have somebody who knows you that well looking after you. Yeah.
Okay. That's very helpful.
Yeah.
I've actually got suddenly a new list of questions here for you.
Oh, okay.
The first one is, would you please share what you have done in your daily life when depression came back the last time?
Wow, that's a lot. I play the piano. I practice. I write in a journal. I practice gratitude. So I write down 3 things that I was grateful for every day for 3 months. So that help me switch my mind from negative thoughts to positive thoughts. Playing the piano, because I was not able to articulate my pain, I was able to express my pain through music, exercise, going to see my psychologist and psychiatrist religiously, tons, learning new things. Yeah, yes. Yeah. So again, Chris, if you could share that link with the audience, it will have all the self-interventions I did when I was helping myself get better. Yeah.
We'll send that over to, they're on the other subsequent slides, but obviously you can't click into those. So for those who are participating in the webinar live with us or registered for this webinar, we'll send an email to you with those links. And for those who are watching the recorded show later on YouTube, we will also include the links below the video as well. So then moving on to the next question is, what are your thoughts about toxic corporate cultures and high pressured corporate environments? If those are triggers, should you leave or should you hang on more, especially when you're in a junior or mid to senior role?
Toxic corporate culture.
Yeah. Do you think you should leave or do you think you should hang on? And does it make a difference depending on the level of seniority that you are?
I would leave.
You would leave.
I would leave. Nothing is more important. Nothing is more important than your health. Yeah.
And regardless of your seniority. So if you're a junior professional just starting out or a couple of years into your career, would you suggest the same as well?
Yes, because if you stay in that toxic culture and it hurts your mental health, one day you would leave regardless. Yeah, so I would do it when I'm still healthy and look for other opportunities.
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, with my recruiter's hat, I would agree as well. You've just thinking about your own career, there are so many other platforms out there, so many working cultures which are better suited for you, and really don't see your current job as your be all and end all. People move on. It's a fact of life. And so if it means having to move on sooner than you anticipated, then so be it. It doesn't mean the end of your career.
Yeah.
Okay. The next question is, do you see a high demand for professional counselors for those in the business and finance sectors? Do you think that the demand has increased as a result?
I think thinking back, like other than my psychologist, I've also seen spiritual healers. Now, these people have no clue about business or finance, but they were able, and capable to help me. So I don't see it that the importance of having a business or finance background to be able to help someone with depression.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right. The next question is, what do you think organizations can do within this region to improve their employee assistance programs, i.e. EAP, with regard to mental health services? Additionally, how can we promote their services more in Asia?
Okay. I've read somewhere that only a small percentage of people are aware that their company offers employee assistance program. So that's one. So if people don't know about it, they won't use it. The other thing is employees do not trust their companies. And this is something the company has to think about. Why are we not creating a safe environment for our employees to use EAP?
But in what ways are they not trusting their employers?
They are afraid that whatever they tell EAP, it will go back to their line manager. Or if they go to see a psychiatrist, I have a friend who was afraid to claim. He was afraid that the insurance company would let his employer know about his condition. So can you see how insecure they feel about their employers?
So the key to that is really, well, firstly, as you mentioned, trying to promote it more within their own organizations. And secondly, addressing the insecurities that many employees may have in taking advantage of the EAP.
Yeah.
In order to gain more trust and more take up.
And also what the other thing I like to, we have, for example, at HSBC, we have panel doctors. The first psychiatrist I went to see was on HSBC's panel list. How should I put this? He had more interest in himself being on that list than my best interest.
Oh.
Okay, so I think vetting the medical professionals regularly is also important. Getting feedback from the users is also important. Because when I first got sick, I was still working in Hong Kong, and then 5 months later, I moved back to Canada because I was no longer able to look after myself. That's when I began seeing Dr. Ramick, who was my psychiatrist in Canada. Yeah.
That leads to the next question. So we have 2 more questions. Do you find it difficult to find a suitable or compatible psychologist or counselor?
I didn't find it difficult because I think I was lucky. But to a lot of people, it is difficult because a lot of people come and talk to me and tell me they don't find their psychologist or counselor or psychiatrist helpful, or the medication isn't working, blah, blah, blah. But the thing we need to do is keep trying until you find the one. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Great. And finally, do you find practicing mindfulness helpful?
For me, no. I've tried everything, but mindfulness didn't help me. It helps a lot of other people, but it didn't help me. Yeah. So I'm not saying it's useless, okay? For some people, it really works. But for somebody like me who cannot sit still for 5 minutes, no.
There are different solutions for different people.
Yeah.
Pretty much. And so, we'll come to an end on the Q&A. Thank you so much for that. So I'd like to recap some of the key points that you've raised in our talk today, and correct me if I'm wrong. So the first one is the onset of depression can be caused by either biological or psychological factors. A lot of people associate depression with emotions, but often it can be other causes. Early identification and treatment can avoid worsening symptoms. Secondly, If you see someone who suffers from depression, respond to them in the same way you would of someone who suffers from cancer or any other serious illness. It's much the same. Thirdly, don't let depression define who someone is. Don't write them off. Focus on the person's ability, not disability. So, Vivian, I'd like to sincerely thank you for your time in explaining your incredible story to us. It's so brave to reveal the traumas you have experienced in the past to us, to so many strangers. We all have so much to learn from your insights and courage. And I hope that today's discussion will help one or more people to seek help and support those from, from both those around them and from professionals. So once again, thank you so much, Vivian, and thank you to all of you who have attended this webinar. And Vivian, you've given us a great idea for a follow-up webinar on the discussion about recovery. So we look forward to having another discussion with you in the not so distant future.
Thank you, Chris. And thank you
so
to
much.
all of you who have attended this webinar.
Great. Okay, thank you all, and see you again next time. Bye-bye.